Ramadan Mubarak, everyone. We are currently in the third day of Ramadan, and while I am typically a mood reader, I will not be constrained by TBRs. This is the one time of year that I really like to be quite intentional about the books that I'm picking up, because I like to make them mostly about Muslim characters, Muslim stories, Muslim authors, and so I always like to curate a pile of books that I like to focus on for the entirety of the 30 days that we will be fasting. For those of you who might not be as familiar with different Islamic holidays and traditions, Ramadan is the 9th month of our lunar calendar, and it is the month that we fast from sun up to sundown, because this was the time when our holy book, the Quran, was kind of revealed to Prophet Muhammad. And it is a time of usually a lot of community, a lot of food, because while we don't have food or water from sunup to sundown, a lot of the community congregates around our meal in the evening to break our fast, which is called iftar. And while that is normally the case, I think it would be very remiss if I didn't kind of talk about the fact that Ramadan this year looks very different, given that there is a genocide and forced famine that is happening in Gaza. While there's always sort of a spiritual cleanse aspect to Ramadan as well, it's a month where we are meant to get closer to our deen, which means faith. This year, I think it's a lot more somber and a lot more reflective, at least it should be. So with that kind of explanation out of the way, I would like to kind of just share the list of books that I've curated for this year's Ramadan. I have quite a lot of books that are on this list, but let's just call it my hopefuls. It's my TBR hopefuls for the month of Ramadan. This is my stack. I also have a couple books that are out from the library. So I've got one audiobook that I'm listening to, as well as a graphic novel on Hoopla that I'm really excited to get to, but we'll get into that in a minute. I just realized that I did not do my little intro. So if you're new here, hi, my name is Taz. If you're not new here, my name is still Taz. But on this corner of the internet, I really just like to talk about the different books that I'm reading and loving, and just like different slice of life Boston things as well. So if that's your thing, come in, check out the vibes. I'm so happy you're here. But without further ado, let's get into the TBR. So I've sort of divided up my TBR slash hopefuls into a few different categories. The first one is graphic novels. There's kind of a theme with my graphic novel selections as well. They're both graphic novel memoirs, but I'm really excited because they have been on my TBR slash my shelves for an obscenely long time. The first one is Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. This graphic memoir follows the author who grew up in sort of revolutionary Iran, and it's been described as a book that is really about like coming of age during a moment of extreme political upheaval. If you're not new here, you probably know that one of my favorite books of all times is The Stationery Shop by Marjane, and that book also follows the Iranian Revolution, so it's set in a very similar time period. That book, of course, is fiction, so I'm really excited to, kind of flip through the pages of this. I also really like the art style. And from what I've gleaned online, this book is also deeply spiritual and kind of questions faith and the belief of God amidst institution. And that is a question that I myself have always grappled with. I feel as though it is a question that I will always be grappling with. So I'm really, really excited to read this. The second graphic memoir that I got is a Hoopla pick, actually, and it's That Can Be Arranged by Fahmy. I've followed Huda on Instagram for the longest time, and yet I have somehow not read any of the graphic novels that she's put out. That Can Be Arranged is her own story, and I believe one of her first, if not her first, book that she published, which kind of just chronicles her marriage and love story, which I think is really sweet. I also think that there is a lot of discourse in the West about arranged marriages and a lot of misperceptions about what arranged marriages look like for Muslims specifically. I think there's a lot of conflation between arranged marriages and forced marriages, whereas the way we kind of operate and view arranged marriages is, you know, kind of like a pre-vetted dating service. So many of my friends always complain about like the apps, the dating apps that they're on, and I think it's really valid to think of arranged marriages in a Western Muslim context as these are just pre-vetted suitor options. So I'm really excited to, you know, read her love story, read her marriage story. I have friends in very happy marriages that have been arranged, and I'm really quite eager to see what Huda has written into her graphic memoir. The next section of books in my TBR/hopefuls is young adult, and I think anyone who knows anything about me, about this channel, knows that I am an adiba jaigirdar super fan. I love Adiba's books so much. I also think Adiba as an author is extremely intelligent and witty, and so she has just become an auto-buy author for me. So it is frankly criminal that I have yet to have read this book. I've read all of her other books, but that one is none other than A Million to One. This book follows 4 different girls. It's set on the Titanic. That's pretty much all that I know about it. I think that there's like some sort of jewel heist that's going on, but I am so here for this. I feel like everyone, myself included, went through this really big like Titanic obsession phase as they were growing up, and so I'm really excited to just kind of get reabsorbed into all of the mystery and intrigue that surrounds the drownings of the Titanic, but also this heist. I also am just very tickled pink because, like I said, I love Adiba so much. She's so smart. She writes incredibly well. The Bangladeshi representation is so precious to me. The queer girl representation is so precious to me. If there is a single author that I can point to and say that I see myself in those books, it's Adiba's books. So the fact that, one second. Do you see that? That is the acknowledgement section. Also, do you see that right there? That like Taz is booked in the acknowledgement section. Thrilled, tickled pink. This book will forever have a place of honor on my shelves, and this is my 15 minutes to fame. That is all. The next YA book that I'm hoping to get to this Ramadan is All This Twisted Glory by Tahereh Mafi. I will be really honest and say that I don't remember the first 2 books that well. I loved this series though. I do remember that. Like, there is just something so fairy tale and visceral about this series in particular. Tahereh Mafi writes like such gorgeous, lush prose, and I'm a really big sucker for very like lush descriptions in writing. And so I'm just really needing to pick up a recap of the first 2 books for one, because this is the 3rd book in this Woven Kingdom series. But I'm also just really excited to revisit the characters, because while I don't remember all of the events that took place in the first 2 books, I have a general sense, which means I also have a general sense of which characters I loved the most. And there's so much more serious in this book, so I'm so happy to be drawn back into this novel. The next section is quite short. It is the only adult book that I've curated for this TBR, and that is The Trinity of Fundamentals by rafeedie. I have gone into some in-depth descriptions of this book already over on my Instagram, so if we're not already friends there, please go check out those posts over there. But I'm so certain that this book is going to kind of rip me to shreds. Just to give a really quick description of what this book is entailing, It is a miracle, frankly, that this book exists and is in my hands, because it is a fictionalized account of Wissam's time in Israeli prisons. This book was then shared, because he wrote it in prison, amongst his fellow prisoners, and it was ultimately confiscated by prison guards. I think what had happened was, as they were sharing it, because the way that they shared it was that they folded up the pages into very, very small little like pill-shaped pieces, and then they would like chuck them back and forth at each other so as to not get confiscated. But I think that there was some like mishap that had happened, and then it like landed in front of a prison guard and ultimately got confiscated. Wisam was also always pretty clear about the fact that he wouldn't ever rewrite it, because there would be no way to kind of rewrite and replicate those feelings that had bubbled up the first time, being so close to his revolutionary days. But unbeknownst to him, someone had smuggled a copy of this book out, and once he was released from prison, he was really surprised to find that it was already in circulation amongst Palestinian revolutionaries. So finally, in summer of 2022, Palestinian youth movement set to task to translate this book, and that is what I have here. I think it is really important to continue to read and share and uplift Palestinian literature, both nonfiction and fiction right now, given that there is a forced femicide, given that there is a genocide, and there is really no better book that I think I would like to start my Ramadan with than this one. The Boston PSL also hosts a book club, and they are reading this one currently. So if you're in the Boston area, they are hosting a book chat for the Trinity of Fundamentals next week on Wednesday, March 20th. I'm really hoping to be there, so I hope I'll see you there too. We're now entering the last category for my Ramadan TBR, and the first one I have out from the library. It is on audio, and it is Unashamed, Musings of a Fat Black Muslim by Leah Vernon. I try very hard every year when I am pulling together this TBR to have a multitude of different backgrounds and perspectives of the Muslims that are writing these books, because I think that there is this like common misconception that Muslims are really just Arabs, and that is not the case. Islam is the second biggest religion in the world. There is just so much regional culture and differences between us, even though we are all under one ummah, which I think is a really beautiful thing. So I like the books that I curate to kind of reflect that. Unashamed is Leah Vernon's memoir, and I've started listening to it a little bit on my commute this morning, and I'm only a few chapters in, but I'm enjoying it so far. Leah has a very strong voice. She has a very specific experience within Islam. She really talks to the fact that there is sometimes hypocrisy within Islam, as Muslims are not perfect. No one is perfect. We're all human. We all make mistakes. We all have the capacity to do bad things. And so I'm really interested to see where the rest of her memoir goes. This next book is a spillover from last year, unfortunately. I just wasn't able to finish it within the month of Ramadan last year, and that is In Sensorium by Tanais. My friend Kriti gifted me this book, and I know I'm going to really love it. I trust Kriti's tastes immaculately. Like, she is one of the people that I go to all the time for book recs. If she recommends a book, I will immediately go out and either buy it or put a hold on it from the library. One of my favorite books that I read last year was Shakti, and that was a recommendation from her. So I trust her explicitly. This is also a book that I'm reading for the trans readathon, which is happening concurrently. Tanais identifies as non-binary, and this is their memoir of growing up in multiple different regions in the US, the South, the Midwest, the North, etc., but all through the perspective of a South Asian, specifically Bangladeshi lens, and all through the lens of one of our five senses, which is scent. The last book that I have for this TBR is A History of Islam in 21 Women by Hossein. I have actually had this book on my radar for a couple years now. It Basically, it is exactly what it chronicles. Each chapter is divided up to focus on a specific woman in Islamic history, from Khadija, who was the first Muslim and the wife of our Prophet Muhammad, all the way to Nur Iyad Khan, who founded like an undercover radio operations. There's also a chapter on Arwa of Yemen, also known as the Queen of Sheba. And if you've been keeping up, you know how obsessed I am with Amina al-Sarafi by Shannon Chakraborty, which, if you know, you know. That is all the spoilers that I'm going to give on that. But I'm also really excited to read this because I feel as though it's been quite a long time since I've picked up any type of Islamic history. So what better time to get back into it than during the month of Ramadan? That is it. That is all that I have for this TBR and for you today. Whether or not you're observing Ramadan, I really wish that the next 30 days bring you clarity, bring you community, bring you closer to your faith, whatever that may be. And if you are amongst the non-Muslims that are observing Ramadan, as well as to all of my fellow Muslims around the world, Ramadan Mubarak again. I really hope that this Ramadan is the last that we are praying for the liberation of Palestine and all oppressed peoples around the world. But with that, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're reading really good books, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.